everyone, and welcome. Some of the stories we have for you right now. A high-stakes White House meeting, but the knives are out.
We put a tariff on steel and aluminum, and what does Canada do? They put a tariff on sports equipment. I mean, really, this is just, it's tone deaf.
The charm offensive hoping to cool down the heated rhetoric.
Looking forward to making sure that this is a success, working with all my friends and colleagues around this table.
The symbolic show of support for Canada from G7 leaders during these very trying times.
The only ask is that no matter what the world throws at us, you always be the same.
A final message from an outgoing Prime Minister.
Well, I don't understand anything that's going on.
Plus, desperate plea for help from a Canadian detained in the United States.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
Today was all about lowering the temperature, reducing the heat, and the negative rhetoric between old friends, with two key meetings, one in Washington, D.C., the second, the G7 gathering in Charlevoix, Quebec, both under the shadow of Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel that went into effect yesterday. Canada's retaliatory measures now in play, and the global trade war, which is ramping up. Okay, let's start in Washington with CTV's Judy Trin and the high-level Canadian delegation meeting with the Commerce Secretary. And Judy, I don't know about this day. What's going on right now?
Let me set the scene for you right away, Sandy. I am outside the Department of Commerce. This is Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick's turf. Any minute now, we are expecting the Premier Doug Ford, as well as the Federal Finance Minister and the Federal Industry Minister, to come out. So we might have to break out of this to take their scrum. But what I can tell you is that the mood has once again changed. Whereas when Doug Ford actually pulled back his electricity surcharge, he characterized that he was given a olive branch by Commerce Secretary Lutnick in the form of a meeting. So there was hope from officials that this would be a conciliatory meeting. What the feds want from this is they want to know what the ground rules are for this game. Trump keeps on changing his strategy, changing what he's going to do. He announces his tariffs over social media, so they want some type of clarity. But it doesn't appear that the Trump administration is going to play nicely. Take a listen to what Lutnick said 15 minutes before this meeting began.
Why are we doing all this business in Canada if they're not respectful, if they're not thankful, and they don't want to do it? Imagine a provincial leader, so like the equivalent of a governor, deciding that they're going to attack America and put a 25% increase on energy prices to teach Donald Trump a lesson.
All right, well, Judy, given this nasty tone while we wait for everyone to come out of that meeting, what's the best possible scenario that could possibly come out of this meeting?
Maybe perhaps a lowering of the tone in terms of conversations, but Canadians should know that tariffs are still coming. There's going to be an expansion. We heard of Trump rail against the European Union. Australia has also levied counter tariffs as well. So this is an expanding trade war. April 2nd is when global reciprocal tariffs come in, and Trump once again said today that he intends on pushing those through. He wants to use tariffs to obviously generate revenue and bring manufacturing back into the U.S. Sandy.
Oh, what a mess. Okay, Judy, thank you. Donald Trump also added to the nasty rhetoric about Canada in a photo op this afternoon following a meeting with the head of NATO, just as the military alliance is facing an existential moment of its own, with the U.S. making overtures to Russia and European allies, as well as Canada, grappling with this new reality. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon was paying close attention to that photo op. And Joy, Donald Trump loves to keep slapping us down. So what did he say this time?
Yes, and he sure does. Donald Trump was asked about the elections in Greenland. The president said he was pretty confident the U.S. will eventually take over that country. Yes, he said that again. Trump even tried to drag the head of NATO into helping him acquire Greenland. Well, what he did is he started to talk about this, and he was saying how critical the Arctic is to national security, and that's when he took another swipe at Canada. Take a listen.
We're in the process of ordering 48 icebreakers, and Canada wants to know if they could use them. I said, well, you know, you got to pay for them. Think of it, Canada. We pay for their military. You know, Canada pays very little for their military because they think we're going to protect them. But even with the icebreakers, so we're going to order 48, and Canada wants to be part of the deal. I say, you got to get your own icebreakers. Then if you're a state, you can be part of the deal.
Well, Joy, slapping us down and harkens back to his approach and his attitude towards President Zelensky of Ukraine when he was at the Oval Office. Now, what about that? What about that U.S.-backed ceasefire? It came up today as well. So where does it stand?
Yeah, the president really wants this war to end. He talks about soldiers dying every day. He sent his envoy, Steve Witkoff, to meet with Russia's President Putin. Trump seemed pretty positive today when he was asked, even though Putin seems to be saying yes, but maybe no to a ceasefire that Ukraine has already agreed to. Trump says he has leverage, but he's not going to use it yet. Here's what he said.
We are getting good signals outside of Russia as to where we are with Russia. And hopefully they'll do the right thing. We've been discussing with Ukraine land and pieces of land that would be kept and lost and all of the other elements of a final agreement. There's a power plant involved.
Sandy, the NATO secretary has formed a pretty chummy relationship with Trump and clearly wants the U.S. to remain in NATO. He was flattering Trump, as almost every leader has, crediting Trump for making NATO stronger by bullying nations to spend more on defense. Sandy?
All right, Joy. Joy in Washington. Okay, so the Dow dropped again today as Donald Trump threatens to expand the global trade war with a 200% tariff on European alcohol. The foreign ministers of those countries were at a G7 meeting in Charlevoix, north of Quebec, with Canada as host and Trump's top diplomat, Marco Rubio, in the room. CTV's Jeremy Sharon is there. And Jeremy, you know, the trade war, of course, front and center. So what was the tone of the meeting?
Yeah, Sandy, absolutely. The tone has been kind of taken over by that trade war, if you will. Secretary of State Marco Rubio held a bilateral meeting with Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly this morning. I am told the focus of that talk was tariffs. We have seen conversations throughout continue to focus on the ongoing trade war, but also on threats made by President Donald Trump on Canada's sovereignty. Marco Rubio, coming into this meeting, said he didn't want it to be a meeting about taking over Canada. He's faced multiple questions about those threats, has not answered them yet. And what we saw today was a show of support from some of the other members here. The foreign minister from Germany, as well as the high representative from the European Union, wore white and red today. They said their color choice was a show of solidarity with Canada. And the Italian foreign minister was asked today about Donald Trump's comments. He said Canada will remain Canada in the future, Sandy.
Okay, and the greater public discussion, just fill us in briefly on what else is being discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of talks about, greater security in regions across the country. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly spoke a little bit more about that agenda earlier today. Here's more from her.
I look forward to discussing how we can continue to support Ukraine in the face of Russia's illegal aggression, and we will want to see just and lasting peace in Ukraine. Of course, we want to foster long-term stability as well in the Middle East in the interest of all the people in the region.
Now, again, this is the G7 foreign ministers meeting. So the other purpose here is to set up the greater G7 meeting happening in Kananaskis, Alberta in June, where, Sandy, we're expected to see Donald Trump make a visit to Canada for that big G7.
Well, that'll be interesting. Okay, Jeremy and Charlevoix, thank you. Now, briefed on all of this is Mark Carney, who tomorrow becomes Canada's 24th Prime Minister, with the official swearing in at 11 a.m. Eastern at Rideau Hall in Ottawa. CTV senior political correspondent Mike Couture now with the process and what happens next.
In first place, the next Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney.
With that win, Mark Carney became the first person to become Prime Minister without a seat in the House of Commons in more than 4 decades. The last one to do it was John Turner, who won the Liberal leadership in 1984 and had to attend question period while sitting in the gallery above the governing Liberals. Turner's term as Prime Minister only lasted 79 days as his party was decimated in the 1984 election by Brian Mulroney's Progressive Conservatives.
The leader of the party doesn't have to run for a seat. We expect the leader of the party to run for a seat. There's nothing constitutionally required.
While Carney was technically elected by 131,674 Canadians who voted for him in the Liberal leadership contest, he's expected to call an election soon. That's when the 29 million eligible voters in this country will have their say. But in the Canadian system, you don't vote directly for the person who will lead your country. That is decided by the party.
People don't vote for the leader. They just vote for the local candidate.
But before any of that happens, the current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, must resign. That will happen tomorrow, and senior government sources tell CTV News Trudeau will do so in a private meeting with Governor General Mary Simon.
The Prime Minister is whoever the Governor General calls on to form a government.
And it's widely expected an election will be called before Parliament is set to resume on March 24th, meaning an actual vote could be in late April or early May. Sandy?
All right, Mike, thank you. And let's pick up on the soon-to-be new Prime Minister and the looming election with CTV's chief political correspondent, Vassy Kapelas. Okay, Vassy, a new Prime Minister to be sworn in tomorrow, along with a brand new cabinet. What do we know about what that cabinet might look like?
Well, a couple of things I think that are most salient to convey to Canadians watching. First, that from a strategic point of view, Carney and his team want to make sure that they send a message, I'm told, that the quote-unquote adults are in the room. And they're going to do that by keeping a couple of people in and around the U.S.-Canada file who have already been there, kind of your most well-known ministers, and shuffling the deck otherwise and condensing it. So the cabinet will be much smaller than the current 37 members and sit instead at between 15 and 20 ministers. That's also impacted election timing because the process to make this cabinet took a lot longer than they had hoped it would. They thought they might be able to make this announcement and have this swearing in a few days ago and be able to call an election early next week. Instead, that election call likely coming much further down the line at the end of the week.
Okay, that makes sense, and that explains a lot. You know, while we wait for the change in leadership, we should mention, and I want to show this to our audience, that Justin Trudeau said his goodbyes today on social media on his last day in office. So give a listen.
I'm proud to have served a country full of people who stand up for what's right, rise to every occasion, and always have each other's backs when it matters most. This may be my last day here in this office, but I will always be boldly and unapologetically Canadian. My only ask is that no matter what the world throws at us, you always be the same.
Okay, Vassy very proudly wearing I am Canadian on his sleeve and on his heart. You know, what happens next is, I guess, up in the air for Justin Trudeau as far as we're concerned, as far as what we know. But what do you make of his last few weeks in office?
I think that statement really kind of is emblematic, Sandy, of just the gargantuan shift in what has occurred in this country in the last 6 or 8 weeks. If Justin Trudeau were making this video 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago, or 3 months ago, the reaction, I think, from Canadians would have been very different. But what has happened in the interim, this existential threat we face from Donald Trump has also, I think, impacted the way in which Canadians view him in these dwindling days of his time in office. And as a result, public opinion polling even shows that his own popularity has ascended in just the last few weeks after being one of the most unpopular politicians in the last number of years as of late last year. So I think that video, that message is emblematic of just how much has shifted in such a short time. Sandy?
All right, Vassy, thank you so much for this. Now, we want to go back to Washington and live and listen in to Doug Ford, who's just come out of that meeting with the U.S. Commerce Minister, Secretary, rather. Here he is.
Tension between families, but that was an extremely productive meeting. And I just want to thank, the Secretary for the opportunity to go in there and stay this long and communicate. We shared a tremendous amount of views back and forth, and I'm feeling very positive. And I just look forward to reaching out again next week. But this, I can honestly say, It was the best meeting I've ever had coming down here.
Why do you say that? Why?
Well, because I feel and I keep saying we feel like the temperature's come down. I'm not commenting on their behalf. We also know we're an extremely important trading partner, I'd say top tier in the world to the United States, and how we can continue working together to support each other. And I know it's still going to be moving forward, and we'll get there. But there's always be bumps in the road. But it was very, very productive.
Everything is still on, right?
I'm sorry?
Nothing has been stopped. There's still
no, but it was very, it was, I don't call them the threats. We're having very productive conversations, and they turned out very, very well. And I just look forward to, again, continue communicating. Next week, we got a lot on the table back and forth, but it was very, very good, very civil, very going back and forth. So I just appreciate the opportunity, and I'm grateful that we're able to do this rather than going back and forth on tit for tat.
Premier, how do you take Commerce Secretary Lutnick at his word when he says something very different to his American audience when he appears on Fox News? Once again, he mocked Canada, he mocked you, he said that Donald Trump taught you a lesson, and that's why you backed down. How do you deal with that type of tone when it's coming from the U.S.?
Well, I can't comment on Secretary Lutnick, what he says. All I know, first time we had an opportunity to sit right across from the table from him, look him square in the eyes, and had a great conversation. It was very positive. That's what I can tell you. It was very, very positive on both sides of the table there. I got one more.
Is the energy surcharge going back on?
With this meeting today, what were you hoping to achieve?
You know, my years in business and years in government, I believe in building relationships. And I think we've come a long way in building this relationship. It's the first opportunity. I've talked to Secretary Lutnick before. Now, keep in mind, Secretary Lutnick is a brilliant business mind, a shrewd negotiator, and he's doing what's right for his country, and I'm doing what's right for my province and in turn our country. But let's continue on this conversation. But I'm leaving this meeting extremely positive. That's what I'm leaving. But I really have to go, guys. I have to go.
Negotiating with Americans.
All right, productive and positive. That's what Ontario's Premier Doug Ford says after a meeting with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick.
What I'm doing.
And we're still listening. Okay. If you heard the tail end of that, and I interrupted him possibly, so productive and positive, that's what Ontario Premier Doug Ford said about a meeting with the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who started off the day making some rather nasty comments about Canada, so we have to take the Premier at his word. But bottom line is nothing has changed. We're still facing and dealing with those tariffs. We're going to take a brief break, and CTV National News will be right back. Don't go away. A Canadian woman is pleading for her release after she was detained by U.S. border officers. Jasmine Mooney was trying to cross from Mexico into California when she was stopped over what she says is a visa issue. CTV's Alex Carpa talked to Mooney to hear her side of the story. And Alex, what did she tell you?
Sandy, Jasmine Mooney has spent the last 11 days in a jail cell in the United States. I was able to reach her by phone during one of her limited calls.
I have no idea when I'm going to leave.
Jasmine Mooney, pictured here in happier days, managed to connect with a phone call from the San Luis Regional Detention Center in Arizona.
It's the most inhumane thing I've ever seen.
My name is Jasmine Mooney.
Mooney says she was living in Los Angeles working for a beverage company called Holy Water when her visa was revoked. She's not sure why, but is guessing it had to do with what she was selling.
They had an issue with one of the ingredients and one of the products, and it was hemp, and I had no idea that that would be an issue.
At the beginning of March, Mooney was in Mexico and attempted to enter at the San Diego border crossing, where she says she got her first visa approved. She was hoping to get another. Instead, she was detained.
I was in an immigration office reapplying for my work visa to America, which I previously had, and without any warning about what was about to transpire.
She's since been moved from San Diego to Arizona, where she says she's sharing a massive jail cell.
The food is not food. The water is disgusting. I didn't eat for the first 6 days because I knew I would get sick.
Alexis Eagles, Jasmine's mother in Abbotsford, BC, is desperate to get her daughter out.
I feel guilty about that, knowing that my daughter is in a concrete cell with approximately 30 other women without any proper sleeping facilities.
Global Affairs Canada told CTV News they are aware of Mooney's detention and are working to gather more information from American authorities.
There has to be more that can be done about this situation. It doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem like something needs to be done. We can't just leave her there.
The family has started a petition and online pleas for Mooney's release. We also reached out to both Immigration and Customs Enforcement and U.S. Customs and Border Protection, but did not receive anything in time for broadcast deadline. Sandy?
CTV's Alex Carpa. As we head to break, a total lunar eclipse known as a blood moon will be visible across Canada tonight. The eclipse will cast a red hue over the country. The phenomenon occurs when the moon, earth, and sun all line up and the moon passes through the shadow. To find out the best time to view the eclipse in your region, go to ctvnews.ca, and we'll be back in a moment. One of the worst earthquakes in 40 years created some scary moments in Italy. The 4.4 magnitude quake hit the southern city of Naples in the early morning hours, causing damage and knocking out power. And Pope Francis is marking a special anniversary today while recovering at a hospital in Rome. It has been 12 years since the Pope became leader of the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. This is also his first papal anniversary where he won't be seen in public. The Vatican says the 88-year-old is in stable condition in hospital. And you are watching CTV National News. Cheers to a milestone for PWHL star Emily Clark. The Ottawa charge forward is behind the first ever beer inspired by a professional female athlete in Canada.
And be able to give back to really important cause, being the breast cancer unit at the Ottawa Hospital and having those funds stay within the community is super important.
Clark attended a launch party at Ottawa's craft beer market. The beer is a raspberry wheat ale called Ottawa Wheat 26. A portion of proceeds will support charitable initiatives, including the Ottawa Hospital's Breast Cancer Centre. So we end on a positive note after quite a day, another day, as we say goodbye to all the chaos and uncertainty still swirling around us. Just know CTV National News is here for you every day, day in and day out, because we're in this together. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Stay strong. Bye for now.